Good evening, everyone. This is the Sinful Savant. Tonight's story is a real special one. It's called My Year as a Pilot. It's a bit of a long story, guys, so please be patient. Make sure you try to watch it to the end, because I know you'll enjoy it if you stay with me long enough. So, without further ado, let's begin. Hello, everyone. It's been almost a year since the weirdest job of my life started. I finally feel like I've got a good enough grasp on the situation to tell it. I got a bit of time to tell you some of it. I'll keep writing when I get a chance. I used to fly airplanes for a living. I was a pilot with a good reputation from the time I started to the time I decided to retire. No one ever had a problem with me. I kept to myself. I never fell asleep at the wheel like you hear so many pilots do. Mechanical co-pilot programs just can't be trusted. I worked for different airlines with different routes over 25 fulfilling years. Nothing beats the scenery from up high. My favorite was always flying over coastal mountainous areas. Suddenly you break from the mountain, and it's blue skies that go from crystal clear to raging black storm water. Off times was always fun too. I spent my free time in shared apartments owned by all the companies I worked for in major cities. I saw the world this way, which wasn't something I ever thought I would get to do when I thought about the poor background I came from. My parents never had any money. I had to work for everything I got. No one is blessing that I had good enough eyes to be a pilot. That's always the biggest dream killer. My retirement came with a lot of surprises. I was working for Qatar Airlines when I retired. They threw me a surprise party even though I'd been working for them for only 3 years. I wasn't even a proper retirement age, only 54. But it felt like it was time to quit and enjoy life. I wanted to go back to college and get my PhD. I was accepted into King's College London, which I'd chosen based on my favorite place in the world to visit. A surprise party wasn't the only thing I got that day, though. When I picked up the last of my mail at the London terminal after the party, there was a letter addressed to my first name only. It had no return address. I tucked it into my bag without much thought, determined to read it at home in my newly purchased flat in Hammersmith. When I got home, though, I forgot about the letter completely. I didn't know then that it would change my life. I put it on the front entry table as I picked up my irritatingly ringing phone. It was a couple of my pilot buddies who were in town and wanted to go out and get a drink. They wanted to check out my new place. I remember I didn't want to let them in, though, because if I did, they'd never leave. Every time they came to London, it would be all, let's stay at Charles' flat. There would be at least more privacy than the shared company flat. We went out. I met them an hour later at a pub near Hyde Park. We had a couple drinks, then I went home alone. I went directly to bed. As I was getting up the next morning, I noticed the letter on my way out to get breakfast and groceries. I hadn't had time to buy any yet, and without anything else to do, it seemed like a good time. When I purchased the flat on my previous visit to London, I found a lovely little breakfast place. I went there. After my food was brought, I sipped a bit of coffee and read over the newspaper I'd picked up at the corner bodega. When I finished, I pulled out the letter, looked over it again. There wasn't anything but my name on the outside. Opening it up, the contents were on beautifully crafted parchment. Didn't seem like paper made in this era. I knew it would be a strange letter immediately. Inside the letter there was only a short message. Charles Balthery, our company has come to understand that you are quitting commercial piloting. We would like to invite you for a drink at 7 p.m., March 2nd, 2015, at the Wolseley. This is a business invitation. Please dress accordingly. Very respectfully, the Constantine Foundation. It was a disconcerting letter, but it piqued my interest. The day I read the letter was the morning of our dinner. After I went to the market, I looked around my sparsely filled house. I didn't have much in the way of furniture or clothing. I only owned one suit at the time, but it was still pressed from my last visit to the cleaners. At 6:50 p.m., I thought I was early, but entering the restaurant, I didn't even need to say my name. The hostess seated me with a gentleman only years older than myself. He clearly came from money. Before I could sit, he greeted me with a firm handshake. His hand was very cold, but I made sure to shake it firmly in return. We sat down, situated ourselves, and a waitress brought a bottle of Malbec over. "Charles, I'm so happy you could make it. My name is Donald Greer. I work for the Constantine Foundation. I don't doubt you attempted to look up information on my company, but you will not find it on the internet. We are a quiet company, dealing with investments and the like for the Constantine family. Recently, the pilot for our private jet met a natural death. During our search for a new one, your name kept popping up. When we learned that you were heading to an early retirement, it was decided upon that we try to entice you to take the job offer we are extending. I want you to know, if you decide to accept, the salary will be 3 times your previous one. We only ask that you agree to sign on for a period of 10 years. After that, we will begin searching for another pilot, if you decide to not continue working for us. We understand that you just purchased a flat here in London. No need to worry about relocating. The Constantines live primarily here. When they decide to travel, you would be the pilot. If they visit wherever they deem best for less than a week, you will stay at the same hotel as them, which will be paid for by the company. If it is over a week, you will be allowed to fly home, then pick up at their behest from whatever location they are at. I would say it's a fairly good gig. Good money, free vacations. Of course you would need to sign a privacy clause, but that is the standard for private pilots. Am I not correct?" This Donald guy was quick to jump to the chase. I barely had time to even begin sipping before he began to speak. "It is, and the deal sounds amazing. It certainly sounds like a good deal of free time for such an immense salary. Yes, there would be lots of free time. Would you like to accept the offer? Let me have till the end of this glass and I'll let you know. You can have till the end of the bottle and anything else you would like. I'm going to give you my card. The bill is already taken care of. Let me know your decision, any time of the day or night." He left me there alone. I thought over his deal. I sipped wine. I finished the entire bottle and began a second. It was really good wine. Halfway through the second bottle, I was getting good and sloshed, but I'd already made up my mind. I saved a bunch of money while working commercial flights. I could double my savings and still go to school with the deal they were offering. On my walk home, I agreed to the job. Donald said he would send a car around 8 p.m. the following day to pick me up. My gut told me things were about to be weird, but I didn't know how weird until then. This is where I leave you, until I can get back online. I've got a flight to make. Part 2. I'm back with a bit of time to continue the story. It's not the end of it, but definitely another large chunk of it. If you didn't catch the first part, it can be found here. I left off with the fact that a car was being sent for me to go to the Constantine family home. The car that had arrived was a sleek black town car. The driver tipped his hat to me when I came outside, and then he held the door for me, as if I was a proper gentleman. I got in. The seats were leather and super comfortable. There was even a bottle of chilled wine waiting. This time the wine was a Colorado Riesling, Foreman Abbey. Riding along smoothly, we seemed to be heading outside of London, towards the airport. We ended up in Kingston upon Thames, at a gigantic manor house. It was beautiful, and I was left speechless by the splendor. There was a butler at the door who led me into a lush foyer, already partially filled with people. They were beautiful. I'm not a fat old man, keeping relatively fit as I enjoy exercise, but something about the Constantines made me feel like I was an ugly duckling trying to model. All eyes were on me as I entered. I looked at each of the 6 people in the room. One was Donald, and the others were an older man and a woman who sat side by side, lounging against each other with books in hand. 2 of the others were boys, roughly in their late 20s, and a girl who looked to be a teenager. All were slim, and they had a certain sparkle to their eye that neither Donald nor I had. The oldest man got up off the couch to greet me. More wine was pushed my way, and I accepted it graciously. I should have been upset that my new employers were trying to get me drunk, but I do enjoy a good glass of wine. Mr. Constantine introduced himself and looked me over. Whether or not I could keep a secret, of course I agreed that I could. It was all about business, and I was a good businessman. With a nod to Donald, Mr. Constantine sat back down, and I followed Donald out into a large study. It seems you have passed Mr. Constantine's personal observations. More was going on there than what you know either way. A job well done. I've got documents for you to sign, and I'll need your banking information in order to set up your paycheck. I've also been authorized to issue to you a sign-on bonus before you even begin. After we're done, the driver will take us both back to town. I've got a work cell phone that you must keep on you at all times. Keep it charged and keep it loud. There's also a work credit card so that you can get around when called via taxi and not pay out of pocket. You'll be paid twice a month at the beginning and at the middle. I filled out a large packet of information. I wanted to ask Donald about his role here and more about the family, but as I signed my non-disclosure agreement, I realized that I should just keep my questions to myself. It wouldn't do to ask much after I promised that I could keep a secret. Obviously, this family liked their privacy. The ride back to the city was quiet. It wasn't a bad ride. 30 minutes of uninterrupted beauty satisfied me, but it was dark outside, so I couldn't see much. I was dropped at my apartment first, and immediately put the phone onto the charger as I settled in for the night. A whole month went by before I received any calls. I almost thought I wouldn't be getting paid substantial amounts of money twice already. I knew it couldn't be a fluke. They just had no need for a pilot. I was out for lunch with my student advisor when the first call came. It was Donald. He gave me an address and told me to be there within 2 hours to get the plane ready. We were flying to Aruba for 4 days. So I went home, grabbed my things, packing a swimsuit even. I made it to Heathrow with time to spare. Donald arrived right after me. The plane I would be flying was lovely. It had a beautiful interior with a separated cockpit that was stocked with food and space to store my things, as well as a private bathroom. I had never seen a plane with such a cockpit. It was beyond luxurious. Donald told me to get inside and close the door. Take a nap. We won't be leaving for at least 6 hours, and you'll need your sleep. I did as I was told, already tired from a night out with heavy drinking. I didn't suspect anything on that flight. There wasn't much to suspect. We stopped and fueled up in New York for a few hours. I napped again there. Finally, we made it to Aruba. I was ushered off the plane ahead of the family. Apparently, they were dealing with something. The door to the cabin was closed. Donald dropped me off at the resort and told me to be ready in 4 days. Time to fly back. I went to the beach and sipped cocktails while looking over some research material. I thought then, what a life to have. Here I am, 54 years old and living the dream. Sure, I would have to work to 64, but this was an easy job. I made many flights like that before I began to become suspicious. We never took a flight before an hour after dusk. If we landed and it was daytime, I left the plane before the family. It was like they were vampires. It's been a year now. I've flown for the family for about 20 times for the whole year. Most flights were short, only going from London to Milan or Prague. On this last flight, Donald did not come. He gave me a packet of instructions. We were going all the way to Australia. It's one of the longest flights I've ever made. I decided to put an autopilot on for the first time in my entire career and go into the back. I planned to feign a need for sugar to put on the strawberries that had been packed in my fridge if anyone asked. I'd worked for them for a year, not asking questions. This seemed like the easiest thing to ask for. Entering the cabin slowly, it was dimly lit. All of the window shades were drawn. Looking about, I noticed one major change in the scenery. In the very middle of the cabin, there were 5 coffins. Each had a different design to it. I wasn't afraid to enter more, but seeing the coffins, I realized that I was about to be asking questions that I wasn't supposed to. If the Constantines were vampires, they might kill me if I found out. If they didn't kill me, I'd still be out of a job and probably out of money if they took me to court. I went back to flying after that. I followed all the instructions to perfection. When I woke up in my hotel room in downtown Sydney the following day, a specially made suit was waiting for me. It was Armani. There were shirts, ties, socks, shoes, and a belt to go with it. From that point onwards, after every flight, I found more clothes and expensive gifts. It was like I was being paid off for not caring further about what I might find in these coffins. Whether it's expensive gifts or the amazing pay and free hotels, I hadn't decided what I should do. I don't even know if I believe that they really were vampires, or if my mind is playing crazy tricks. Maybe I'm secretly taking drugs in coffins around the world. Right now I really don't know what a course of action to take. The NDA I signed is the biggest issue. Do I find out with the risk of breaking my NDA, or do I just find out for the safety of humanity? Part 3, the final part. I apologize for the wait time. With my dissertation work and meetings with my advisor, I haven't had a lot of free time to even think about work if they aren't calling. I haven't been sleeping well either. There's just too much in my head right now. I can't believe how long my story is beginning to turn out. I thought it was just a weird one-off thing, but it's really turning into something more. I'm afraid of where it's going. Many people mention that I should just let the weirdness that I began to experience at my work go. I mean, coffins compared to huge monetary gifts and payments for my service as a pilot is hardly a question that I want to answer. Concerns about the legality of what I was transporting has weighed on my mind, but I suppose greed won out, and I agreed to drop my blossoming questions. Both traits are so unlike me. I hardly ever find a reason to ask questions, but when I do, it becomes a mission to answer them. My classes have already allowed me to forget about it with large coursework, but curiosity always wins out. What have the Constantines been looking for so aggressively? We've been flying around to small islands throughout the Caribbean. We went there for a week, and if my count is correct, without looking at my paperwork, we've touched down on 30 different islands during the nighttime hours. A different man every time would come aboard the plane for a few hours. Then he would leave and we'd take off again. I don't think they found what they were looking for, but we ended up coming back to England anyways. Donald met us at the airport when we arrived home. His face seemed a little more hopeful rather than the stoic look of slight discomfort he generally had. But when he saw the Constantines depart the plane, his face fell into a dark look. I tried to keep my eyes down until I got into the cab that was waiting for me to go home to my flat. The next day, I got a call asking me to come to the house to discuss another trip. I was being brought in as a subject matter expert. I didn't know exactly what I could possibly contribute, but I agreed to be there by the designated time. It was always 8 p.m. that we met. When the rented town car dropped me off, ready to be on call to return home, I was surprised at the number of parked cars in this circular driveway. Inside there was a dozen guests, including the Constantines. The only face I did not see was Donald. It was rather rare when I noticed a spare moment. I pulled Mrs. Constantine aside. I don't want to pry, but has Donald taken ill? Oh, Charles, glad you could make it. Unfortunately, Donald no longer works for us. His services were not adequate. It's such a shame because he was doing so well until recently. He'd worked with us for so long. Enough talk of sad things. Grab yourself another drink. Take part in the merriment. Later, we're hosting a discussion panel about American art. As the only American in attendance, it will be interesting to hear what you have to say about certain things. I'd hardly ever heard Mrs. Constantine speak, and I didn't even know her first name. I liked the way she spoke, though. Her accent was soft, Eastern European one. Every word from her lips sounded sultry. I tried to not let my nerves cloud my judgment. I was wanted for information on American art, something that I knew nothing about. Sure, I've been to museums, but I'm not a subject matter expert by any means. I think she assumed that Americans have the same educational standards as Europeans, and the same appreciation for old masterpieces and the history of a style. We don't. Ours is all old Western-style life paintings and ranches with a bit of mod soup cans and nonsense modern art. We don't have paintings from 500 years in the past. Luckily, the gratuitous amount of aged wine in attendance helps the mind relax. I worked my way through 4 stout glasses while being introduced to different members of the party. They were all art collectors or art specialists. I received several gallery invites that began to fill my phone calendar. It was near impossible to turn them down. They were very convinced that they could teach me something when they learned I knew hardly anything about art. Finally, 11 p.m. rolled around, and I was ushered into an ornate dining room. The table was filled with hors d'oeuvres. Each member in attendance had an assigned seat. At the far end of the table was a projector and a computer, which was set up for the show with some slides. Mr. Constantine sat off to the side of a podium where a young man, hardly 25, was preparing to speak. I nibbled on a chocolate-covered strawberry as he began. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am Hayden Kingsley. I currently work as a curator at the Smithsonian as an intern. My specialty is Venezuelan art, which I became interested in during my time living in Aruba as a child. I will be doing a small presentation on a specific artifact that we know exists. It is a dagger. Currently the whereabouts of the dagger are unknown, but we have some intel on the myths associated with this dagger. The dagger is known as the Kupapali, or the God's Wish. The tribe of origin that created it is unknown. It was stolen before a final decision could be made. The legends associated with the dagger, through word of mouth that we've been able to gather, is that this dagger was used in a ritual. The dagger could grant or take away immortality if used the proper way. It is said to have been dipped in the fountain of youth. On the screen they were showing a curved blade. It looked familiar to me. I couldn't place it though at first. Where is this dagger from? We do not know, but it has surfaced to our knowledge in Aruba. It made its way through a series of collectors in Grenada, St. Lucia, Guadalupe, Cuba, and various islands in the Bahamas. The Smithsonian took charge of the dagger in 1965. Only 6 months later, it was stolen, and we haven't been able to find it since. The presentation was short. There were a few poorly colored images and handwriting that were shown when Hayden was done. When it was complete, Mr. Constantine relieved Hayden. "We have brought you here today in order to see if you have any intelligence, or if you can reach out to your colleagues on whether or not anyone has spotted this dagger. We have become very interested in it and would pay a pretty penny for this dagger. Please be on the lookout. We have exhausted our previous network of leads. Anything would help at this point. Now please continue to eat, drink, and be merry." This was why Donald had been fired. He had failed to get them this dagger, but why did they need it? The Constantines couldn't really believe that this dagger created immortality. I excused myself from the group and headed to the bathroom. It was so familiar to me, but I couldn't place it. I've seen the dagger somewhere, or one like it. Lost in thought, I became lost in the house. I was heading down a sloping hallway. The air was different here. It began to smell stale and earthy, and when the hall evened out, it smelled rancid. An animal had to have died down here. Looking around, making sure no one had noticed that I had come down here, I noticed another hallway to the left up ahead. When I moved towards it, the smell grew stronger. Against my instincts, I peeked around the corner. It was a singular hallway with one door at the end. The door looked like a jail cell. It had bars across it with hardly any light coming in. I glanced again back up the hall to make sure no one was coming before I slipped out of sight. Inching closer, I made it up to the door holding my nose and I peered in. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the darkness. Even though it was hard to make anything out, I was slowly beginning to realize that I was looking at a dead body. Not just any dead body. It was Donald, and he was ripped apart. Something, or someone had shredded his body into little pieces, and I could see maggots crawling on his skin. Only his head was left intact on a pole sticking out of the dirt ground. It was horrific, and I almost vomited on the spot. Running as fast as I could away from the door, I ran back up the slope and somehow managed to find my way back into the main part of the house. I barricaded myself into the bathroom and proceeded to vomit up fruit and booze. Once my stomach was empty, I washed my face off and my mouth out. I wanted to leave and never come back. Torture and death is not a part of my bucket list. Exiting the bathroom, I almost ran directly into Mr. Constantine. He was waiting for me with a stoic look, as if he were bored. "There you are, Charles. We couldn't find you and wondered where you'd gone off to." "Must have just kept missing me, sir. It seems like I had too much to drink. I might have to leave soon." "That would be a shame. You could always just stay here tonight." "Well, sir, I was thinking about the dagger. I've seen it somewhere before. I wanted to go home and check my books, and some pictures I have from various vacations. It's on the tip of my mind. Very good. Anything you can find will help. He looked like he was thinking something over. Whatever he decided, he headed back towards the party. I followed, making a phone call to my driver to take me home. Half drunk, I did end up digging through my things. I didn't find anything of use, and I went to sleep. Throughout the night, dark and bad dreams plagued me. It was like something was combing through my mind looking for something. My mind's eye saw Mr. Constantine, but his mouth was filled with sharp fangs. When I woke up, my heart was pounding, and I was drenched in sweat. I never slept so poorly in my whole life, and I had a terrible hangover to go with my exhausted body. There was one good thing that came out of it. I knew where the dagger was. Still think I shouldn't be worried about the Constantines? Dead bodies, creepy dreams, and a dagger that could grant or take away immortality? If you believe in that sort of thing. And I'm 100% sure the Constantines know I found Donald's dead body. I just don't know what they're going to do about it. Thanks for listening, everybody. And if you stuck through to the end, I greatly appreciate it, trust me. I know this was a super long story, but I just wanted to kind of mix up the stories and go with a lot more of a in-depth, kind of a real span of time, because this happened to him over the course of a year. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to comment, let me know what you think of the video. Leave a like, share the video, and please subscribe. Join the Sinful Nation. And guys, email me your stories too. My email is in the info box below. And any emails I get, I'll feature those stories on upcoming videos. So until next time, stay sinful.